I really want to know, I know everybody wants to talk to you about cameras and camera gear. You're an ambassador for a camera company, but what I really want to know is what first led you to wedding photography?
Oh, well, that's a little bit of a weird story in that I was never a photographer at all, had no ambition to be a photographer, didn't even own a camera. However, I was commuting 2.5 hours each way every day to a day job in London from where I live here, which is in the west of England. And I basically was exhausted, just kind of, it just couldn't carry on. So one day I was on the tube and I picked up a magazine, one of those free magazines that you get quite often. And it was just left on the seat next to me. And I picked it up and I just randomly opened a page, and it was about weddings. And I thought, oh, this is not interesting to me. I'll just, skip. I'd already been married twice by that point. So I was about to skip over. I was about to skip the page. And then I spotted these black and white wedding pictures in the corner. And they were pictures by Jeff Askoff. And I thought, wow, these are amazing. I've never seen anything like that before, from a kind of photography point of view, certainly not weddings. And then I just thought, wow, maybe this is something that piqued my interest enough to be something I could do. So I went home. I said to my wife, I don't think I'm going to be a wedding photographer. And she was like, well, you don't own a camera. You've never been a photographer. You don't really smile that much. And and that was it. And so I bought myself a camera. I went on some workshops and various other things, and yeah, I've photographed nearly 500 weddings now since then.
Wow. Do you remember your early days? Were you particularly nervous going in, or were you just excited to kind of get rolling with it?
Oh yeah, I was very nervous. I remember my first wedding ever was the day before my birthday. It was an August wedding, 2008, I guess it was. And I was terrified, absolutely terrified. And I just went and, I just basically took pictures of absolutely everything I could. The clients like the pictures, but obviously now when I look back at them, I think, ooh. I'd bought all kinds of gear and kit. I had a monopod that I thought you had to use, and a really expensive monopod it was too. And I left that at the church. I must have taken about 20,000 pictures that day and just hoped for the best. And they came out okay, but yeah, it was terrifying. And I came home to my wife that night and I said to her, I'm not sure I've done the right thing.
Speaking in generalities, I find that I tend to get a very negative reaction from other photographers when I tell them that I'm a wedding photographer. Why do you think that there is sort of a stigma about wedding photography and like a negative reputation?
You're right. There definitely is, but I think less so now than there has been in the past. I think now, we see a lot of creative wedding photography now, and, all different styles, all different genres, and to the point where, there's entire bridal magazines dedicated to photography and stuff. So I think it's a little bit less now. But yeah, I think, this probably goes back to the kind of 80s and 90s when the wedding photographer was usually, and I say usually in air quotes because not always, was, older guy, sweaty armpits, dressed up like a black ninja, bossing everybody around and telling everybody where to stand and look, and setting up fake cutting of the cake and all that kind of stuff. And I think that it's probably a hangover from that. But it's worth remembering now that a lot of news photographers and photojournalists and stuff have, as that market has died, they've spread their wings into weddings. So it's not so much of a detrimental kind of look on the industry now as I think it once was.
You are very much a natural storyteller with your wedding photos. Have you found that the rise of mobile phone cameras inhibit your ability to take candid photos at weddings? And what's your attitude towards mobile phones at weddings in general?
It's definitely become more difficult for sure in terms of, I find, I don't actually mind people having phones because that's the world we live in, right? It's a little bit like I read an article once about a photographer back in the 50s complaining about everybody who sat there reading newspapers, and newspapers now are the mobile phones of today, and we look back at those pictures of people reading newspapers with nostalgia and think, oh, do you remember when we used to read newspapers and everybody used to sit on the train with a massive newspaper in their laps? So, in time, people will look at the pictures of people on their mobile phones and think, oh, do you remember? Look at the size of that mobile phone. And why aren't they taking photos with their eyeballs like we can? All of that stuff is part of history going by. But in terms of the physicality on the day, in terms of how it presents itself, not so much people with the cameras, but people who, and this is generally the younger generation, who seem, they see you with the camera and they're very self-conscious. Don't take a picture of me. Don't take a picture of me. And yet they walk around all day long taking selfies to put on Instagram and put filters and things like that on it. So I feel that and again, I'll use air quotes, the Instagram generation are being shielded a little bit from real photography, and they're in this kind of fairy tale world where they can just apply filters and make themselves look different and better and nicer, and that's causing them to have conscious issues about the way they look and the way they feel. And everybody has to look a certain way on the internet and what have you. So yeah, I mean that's an issue, but it's a fad. It's a passing thing, and it's just the world we live in, isn't it?
Well, I think it's a byproduct as well of sort of social media is a great way for, again, air quotes, but younger people to control the narrative of the way that their life looks to other people. And a photographer is someone that can show someone in a different light. And I think that's obviously scary for some people that are used to being in complete control of the way that they look to the outside world that they think matters.
Correct. Yeah, I agree totally. I totally agree. And I think, as my daughter now is 12, and, she's grown up with the warnings of social media. So I think it's a generational thing. And, hopefully people, as it becomes the norm, the everyday norm, it'll become a little bit more real.
So did you ever go through a stage of shooting work that didn't suit your style? And if you did, how did you escape the cycle of, not working to the way that you wanted to?
Yeah, I mean, I did to a certain extent. I was insistent right at the beginning to all my clients that, I'm going to shoot in this thing that was called documentary photography, although I didn't probably realize at the time what that actually was. And I, right at the beginning, I had, that very first wedding, they were like, yeah, we understand totally. We don't want any formal photographs or anything. And then just before I left, they said, when are we going to do the group shots? and right. Then they did 69 group shots.
Wow.
And it was dark and it was inside and it was a real baptism of fire. So I have been very, obviously I don't say that I never do group shots. I'd say 50% of my clients come to me because they want zero formal stuff at all, and the other 50% come because they appreciate what I do, but they still want one or two family shots, and that's fine. But yeah, I was very, because of how it happened, and I left one industry, which was a reasonably well-paying industry, to do something else. I was insistent that I wasn't going to be spending Saturdays at other people's weddings doing something I didn't like. And right. So I kind of forged that brand, if you like, and kept to it. And it's been pretty much the same ever since.
In the build up to your weddings now, do you coach your clients on sort of how to be photographed candidly?
I don't. I really leave that up to the website and Instagram and my kind of branding. So my website is in place pretty much to attract people, but also to filter out the people that aren't really going to be up for the style. So everything, if people actually read my website, the clients, they can have no doubt about the style and the way that the wedding will be shot. And, the follow-up email I send to an inquiry outlines that again and reminds them of it. So they're pretty much good to go by the time that they've kind of sent that email inquiry. And typically I don't meet clients beforehand. Occasionally I'll do a Skype meeting with them or something, but it's very, very rare for me to actually see them before the wedding day. And, they now, at least, and it did take several years for this to become the norm, but now they just get it. They kind of, I say hello, all right, Kevin, how you doing? Just get on and do your thing. And that's music to my ears when I hear them say that. Just get on and do your thing. And, I click away for the day. I just blend in and do my thing, and then I go home.
Amazing. I think it's something I'm very jealous of, the fact that you've got that ability to kind of carry that sway. I'm still kind of carving that out for myself, so I'm very jealous. You've photographed a lot of destination weddings, something else I'm particularly jealous of. Where's been your favorite place to photograph a wedding? And is there anywhere left that you'd love to go?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's loads of places I'd love to go. The last 2 weddings I had booked before the lockdown, and hence I couldn't shoot them. One was in Amsterdam and the other one was in a little glass bubble in the Baltic Sea in North Germany. So it was a small wedding. You go out on a little boat, you climb up this step ladder into basically a glass bubble that's sitting above the ocean. But sadly, that wasn't to be. The last wedding I did actually get in before the lockdown was in the Swiss Alps. That was beautiful. That was a multi-day wedding. So the kind of formal element was in Zurich, and then we headed up to the Alps. Mostly it's Europe. You can't. I get a lot of inquiries about shooting weddings in America, but you can't just rock up and shoot a wedding in America. Well, not legally anyway. You need to get a visa, which is very difficult to get. So I typically don't do any outside of Europe. Although I'd love to. I'd love to do more kind of documentary style weddings in strange places. Let's just say I shot one inside the Arctic Circle in Norway, northern Norway. That was lovely. Middle of July, 24-hour daylight, snow on the ground.
Amazing.
So yeah, I've been to some great places. But
I did the exact opposite of that. I did Arctic Circle, Finland, and I did it in January where there was like 1 hour of daylight. So I think you got the better deal on that front.
Yeah, that sounds chilly, I have to say. But I would say about destination weddings is they're lovely to do, of course, but it's not all glamour. There's a lot of stress about flights and, getting your gear across and timings and everything else. But yeah, they are nice to do.
So you shoot street photography as well. Do you think that street photography can teach skills that can translate over towards being a wedding photographer?
Yeah, definitely. And this is, predominantly for people who shoot documentary style, but I think 99% of wedding photographers in the UK shoot a vast majority of their day as candid wedding photography anyway. So, whenever I'm shooting streets, and I always say this to my students and stuff, is there's only 3 things you need to look for, and that's light, composition, and moment. And if you get that right in a picture, you've got a winning picture. And the streets are the perfect place to practice that, to hone that skill. You can wait, you can watch, you're under no stress, no time constraints. You can observe people being people. You can look for the humanity elements, the interaction. And then when it comes to taking that to weddings, it's the same thing. When you're shooting candidly, it's exactly the same thing. Light, composition, and moment. And those 3 things come together. It's very rare and very hard if you're shooting purely candidly to get a picture with good light, good composition, and a good moment. But it gives you a bit of a better fighting chance.
Is there a particular part of a wedding day that you prefer photographing, or that you sort of universally always enjoy? Or is it just generally the whole course of the day that you enjoy?
Yeah, I'd say generally it's the whole day. I think probably my least favorite, to flip that question on its head, is bridal prep. And that's changed over the years. And that's probably because now I'm a kind of middle-aged guy who's, when I walk into the room full of young bridesmaids and brides and everything, it's very clear that I'm the elephant in the room type thing. So that's, although you still get beautiful pictures and I still do my thing, it's probably become my least favorite element of the day. And then the rest of it is pretty much, I enjoy it all the way through. I love this. I love church ceremonies. I prefer to photograph it in a nice, beautiful church than perhaps a hotel or something. And, not that makes a difference to the clients, but it's, it's from a personal thing. I prefer to shoot that kind of stuff. And then, the kind of drinks reception and all of that stuff is very good. That's where I normally get my best stuff, the drinks reception. So, and the immediate moments after the ceremony. And I always say to my clients, look, once the ceremony is done, you come out of the church or the hotel or wherever you are, and ignore me. You just greet your guests, get on with being hugged and loved and all that stuff. Whatever you do, don't look at me and wait for me to tell you what to do, because those moments will just evaporate. And as soon as everybody else is expecting me to start organizing things, which I won't, then the whole dynamic changes.
So I'm going to get killed if I don't do this. Although I'm not particularly a big gear person, I'm more interested in the actual process of photographing. I think if I don't talk to a Fuji ambassador about cameras, I'm probably going to get lynched. So just to start off with a bit of a broad question, but I feel like we're kind of reaching a stage where cameras can't be improved. We're getting such high resolution and so many shots per second, and memory cards that take so much, and there's so many redundancies, and the video features and so on. Do you think that we're getting to the point where cameras can't be improved?
Yes, I absolutely see what you're saying. I mean, if you look at people, I always revert back to the Observer photographer Jane Bown, and she shot with the same Rolleiflex for 60 years. So you don't need to have the latest and greatest technology to be a good photographer, for sure. However, I think it's a competitive market. So if people are, if Sony come out with a camera that can shoot at, I don't know, 500,000 ISO and have pinpoint accuracy focusing in pitch black, then that's that's going to be a competitive edge to the people who have that camera. So, the industry will continue to make marks in things like sensor, noise, and various things like that. I mean, I think physically and scientifically, they're not going to get many more megapixels in, certainly in APS-C and full frame. Things like medium formats that Fujifilm already done, and obviously there's lots of other companies that that will only get cheaper and faster. And it comes with its own problems in terms of things like file size. But the way that I see things going really is more not so much the image taking technology, but the future technology in terms of we've got 5G coming now. So I envision cameras not too far down the line that have 5G technology built into them. So you take a picture and it's backed up in the clouds the moment you take a picture, and even further than that, I can envision being able to take a picture, have it sent to, I don't know, a folder in the cloud, run a Photoshop action on it, and editing is done by the time you get home. That kind of stuff is where I think real excitement in technology is going to be for me.
Well, we had the megapixel race for a while, and I think people started to wise up to that was just sort of, they were just kind of arbitrary numbers that weren't doing much. And I think you're right. One place I do see cameras still being able to improve is just constantly compressing the difficulty in use down to be as simple as possible, so that you can basically take a picture with absolutely no knowledge of how the camera's actually functioning. I think that's probably the last area, other than, like you say, the huge technological jumps towards like 5G. I think just simplifying the camera down to be almost instinctive rather than something that requires any kind of intellectual acknowledgement to make it function. I think that's the only place it can really go at this point.
I agree with you, and effectively that's what mobile phones have done. You just point and click, and that's a massive massive competitor for professional camera manufacturers is the mobile phone industry. Point and shoot cameras sales are basically zero now because everybody has a camera on their phone, and they do that very well. You don't need to worry about the settings, the light, or anything with your phones, especially the newer mobile phones, the iPhones and Huawei's and all that kind of stuff. They can do whatever you need them to do, and you just point and click.
I actually wrote a short blog back around the release of the X Pro 3, which I think was like October, November time. A camera that I do desperately want, and I was really excited about the hidden screen. And just overall, I love the ergonomics and the aesthetics of that camera anyway. So the X Pro 3 was a great next step for the X Pro 2. But what I really think is that the X Pro line should stick to stills and lose all video functionality because I just don't think it's designed to do that kind of work. And that having a degree of separation between the X Pro line and the XT line, with the X Pro being the stills camera and the XT being the hybrid, that degree of separation would actually be good for both lines. But you're an ambassador for Fuji, so why am I wrong?
You're not wrong. I agree with you. Actually, I also would I never use the video functionality on my rangefinder style cameras. I only use it on the XT range. However, what I would say is that it just wouldn't sell from a marketing point of view because the sensors are the same. So effectively, all they would be doing would be disabling the video functionality in the X Pro, and people will say, I want video in my X Pro. Why should I pay more or less or whatever, for a different camera? And it's the same technology inside. That's the big problem. I mean, Leica were very brave when I can't remember the name of the model now, but they brought out a camera with no LCD on the back, very, very simple. And that was a beautiful camera. And, I think Fujifilm in the past, at least, have looked at those kind of ideas, and that's essentially what the X Pro 3 was meant to be. And I think they've done it very well. They have that hidden LCD on the back and the sub monitor, and for all intents and purposes, it could be used like an old analog camera. But it does have modern technology in it, and I think that if they just disabled that, then it just wouldn't sell. And I think they know that too. Same reason why I think that they haven't done a monochrome camera, because a pure monochrome sensor would be a lot more expensive to produce and just wouldn't sell.
There's one other idea I have. I'm definitely just pitching ideas at this point, but I'm a huge fan of the X Pan, and I think Fuji could do a version of the X100V or whatever, but do it with an X Pan style sensor with that really wide pano sensor. I think that's something that could potentially sell, especially dragging some people over from the film crowd, which I think Fuji's very good at.
Yeah, I agree. And, believe me, they look into all of these kind of things. And, we do have discussions as ambassadors with them about ideas and everything. And that's come up in the past. I think ultimately they're a clever industry. They're a clever company. And in an industry where most camera sales are declining, theirs are going up. And that's because they have, and I'm not saying this just because I'm an ambassador, but it's because they've been sensible with their product line. They've made a camera for everybody effectively. And I think that if they spread themselves too finely, which I think at one point they were very close to doing, they had the XT, they had the XT100s, they had the X100Ts, they had the XT30, the XH cameras, XE line. And I think that they're streamlining a little bit now to concentrate on the ones that they know will sell. Things like the X Pan, things like a monochrome sensor film, things like a camera with no unnecessary bulk or technology they won't sell a lot, but perhaps they're the kind of thing that they could do as anniversary editions or special editions or limited editions, and the fact is, if it's a small run, they will be a lot more expensive, which in turn makes them collectible. So, who knows? But yeah, I agree with you. The X Pan stuff would be great.
Have you ever used the GFX line for weddings specifically? Is that something you'd want to use?
No, I have a GFX 100, which is for my commercial work, or was for my commercial work. I got it just before the lockdown. I haven't really used it much. So I did have a GFX 50R. I bought one of those, and I took it to a few weddings. And actually, for the candid stuff, it was okay in good light. But not. It was big, and although not huge, but big. And I just felt it wasn't doing for me what I wanted it to do, which was allowing me to be, incognito and quiet and as small cameras as possible. But for other people who are doing more fine art, more editorial type wedding photography, group shots and stuff like that, the GFX range is going to be great because, if you're printing, if you're not printing, then don't even think about it. It's just not worth it. But if you're printing, even on small prints in an album, you will see the difference, massive difference over APS-C and full frame, and APS-C and medium format, but also full frame and medium format.
I think obviously you're an extremely busy man. I don't want to take up too much of your time. So I think I'll draw things to a close, but I am going to ask you a fairly broad question to end. You write articles, you're a brand ambassador, you're a public speaker that's traveled the world, you photograph weddings all over the place, you're a leading voice in photography. At this point, is ambition sort of hard to come by, having done so much?
No, not at all. I always think that you can see it with some photographers when they get a little bit lazy, I think, and they kind of, I don't know, I hate to use the word rock star, but they like to think of themselves as rock stars, and I very much hate that. Whilst I do the public speaking, I'm not particularly gregarious. I'm usually the person, kind of the hardest person to find at the bar type thing. Not because I wouldn't buy a drink, but because I'm kind of, I don't like the limelight so much. But I think for me, it's always been about the images for the clients and for me, and if I can carry on producing images that make people have happy nostalgic memories in the future, then that's enough motivation that I need. Whether that manifests itself still in weddings, or whether it's NGO work, or whether it's family photography, as long as people can look at the pictures and have an emotional connection to them, then I'll feel like I'm still doing what I need to be doing.
So the reason that I'm doing these podcasts at the volume that I'm doing them currently is just to kind of put something out to keep minds busy, keep people away from watching the news and depressing themselves and so on. Do you have any recommendations for photographers that people could look out for?
During this time, there's all kinds of stuff, isn't there? YouTube, and I noticed on I think it's the Masters of Photography website. They've published a page full of entirely free photography documentaries that you can watch. They're all on YouTube, but some of them are feature length. There's maybe 30 or 40 of them on there. Of course, Neil and I do a daily podcast called the Fuji Cast, which people can find. There's all kinds of stuff. I found Instagram live stories that have been really interesting over the last few weeks. That's kind of interesting. But other than that, I have to say that we're now in week 4, but for the first 2 or 3 weeks, I didn't really pick my camera up. I was too busy reorganizing weddings and dealing with the financial implications. But I feel that if people look at the work of somebody like Patrick Larocque in Canada and see what he can produce just sat at his desk, the images he can make are just superb and sublime, then it will encourage you to just pick the camera up and photograph whatever's in front of you, and you can do that in your own home.
Amazing. So what I like to do at the end of all of these, again, it's become a little bit of an ironic task for someone like me to ask someone like you to tell everybody where they can find you. But if you could give me your sort of social media links and your website and stuff so people can find your work.
Okay, so my main website is kevinmullinsphotography.co.uk. That's the wedding stuff. I have a couple of others. I have f16.click, which is more of my personal and tech work. I have a new website launched just this week, actually, called ministryofshadows.co.uk, which is all about black and white photography, and that's submission based. So if people want to submit to that website, and it's hopefully going to be a community place. Instagram, Kevin Mullins Photography, and that's about it, really.
Amazing. Thank you so much for doing this.
No worries, Kris. Thanks for having me.